All right, hello everyone. Hello, Paul. This is Dispersing the Fog. I'm Adam Rogers here with Paul Palango. Looking good, Paul.
Yay. We're here.
Yeah, we're here, and it's episode 35 of Dispersing the Fog. Don't know any athletes with number 35. I have to think about that one. November 9th, 2025. And we got a great show for everybody tonight. We lots of things to talk about. We'll talk about this a little later. We got a major floor crossing of Nova Scotia MP. We've got Trailer Park Boy getting charged, and we have a guest. We have Curt Allen coming back to talk about some of the things we've been covering over the last few weeks here. We had some great guests, and Curt being one of them, and he's going to come back and give us his reflections on what he's seen in the last few weeks. But before we start into all that, Paul, let's check in. You How are you doing? How's your week
How
been?
am I doing? I raked leaves today. I ventured onto the grass.
Oh, all right.
Been doing this for a while. We have, a relatively large property, and there's a lot of leaves there.
You don't just leave them where they sit, where they lay, where they land?
I've been ordered by Sharon to rake them up.
Yeah, it looks better. Looks better. You don't
So I did
you
it.
don't agree?
I personally like just chopping them all up with a lawnmower and let them stay, but I'm not in charge of those things.
Well, I would do the same actually, and I thought I had the last mowing of the year done, and I still kind of think that, but the grass has grown up and the leaves are around it, but it's all soaking wet now because we did have some rain here in Nova Scotia the last few weeks, so or last few days, so I'm gonna
Oh,
have to
what we
wait.
have, like in our property, we have probably several hundred trees
So you
and
got a
a
lot of
bunch
work to
of
do.
gardens and stuff like that. And there's lots of leaves.
She's just trying to make sure you get some exercise, Paul. She probably doesn't care
I
too much
got
about the
it.
leaves.
I did it.
Yeah.
And
Oh, good. You feeling
yeah,
good?
I survived. And I had, Sharon and I both had our COVID and flu vaccines
There you go.
because we believe in science. Um, in fact, I got another vaccine coming up, RSV vaccine, because I'm old. So I get to have that too, and I'll take it. And it's otherwise it's $450 if you pay over the counter, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
covered in Nova Scotia.
Oh, well, good for us. We got lots of money here in Nova Scotia. We pay for whatever's
Yeah.
needed. Uh, well, I didn't rake any leaves, as I said there. I was away actually this weekend in Halifax, and I hung out with a crowd yesterday that I don't think I ever really encountered, which is the Halcon crowd. I went there with the family, took my son there, took our son there to Halcon. What an experience. Like, do you know what I'm talking about? The comic convention, but it's not
Yes, the
comics.
comic
It's
thing. Yeah.
it's like, everybody's dressed up. Everybody's anyway, there's lots of Star Wars and lots of every kind of animated thing and cartoon you could think of. People are dressed up as those things and it was fantastic. We had a lot of fun. Sean Astin was there from Lord of the Rings as sort of their big draw. Did a session yesterday, a speech, and answered some questions from the audience. So lots of fun. Lots of
You
people.
just don't strike me as a guy who'd be at Comic-Con.
I tell you, I actually okay. So I did end up seeing two people I knew, but there were like hundreds and hundreds of people there. And it's like, I don't know any of you, any of you people. This is not the place for me. But everybody was a big smiles on their faces. Everybody's having fun. Everybody's very orderly. Like, they just had the lineups. They had like arrows on the floor. People were very obedient, follow the rule followers. It was quite an interesting place to be. So lots of fun. Played a prototype video game with my son there at one point, and so. Lots of cool stuff. So,
I don't know. I don't know if being a betting guy, I don't know if I would bet on you ever being there. So, because I'm not a betting guy, but
well, good thing you're not a betting guy. Although, given the current climate, if I could have just told you and told you secretly that I was going, and you could have made a whole bunch of money if you could bet on things like that.
oh, you probably can bet on those things.
And you could bet on everything now. You see this with the baseball players, where baseball season's over, but now the baseball stories that come out are the bad ones. So they get these pitchers. First of all, it was the basketball players last week that were tipping off people to, oh, I'm not going to get this many rebounds. I'm going to be injured. Bet on this. And now we have pitchers, bet, uh, you know, telling people what they're going to pitch on a certain pitch, and you can bet on that too.
Well, yeah, propositional betting. We talked about this recently. I mean, this is destroying sport. You're getting pitchers like pitchers charged today from Cleveland, Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz. And what are they doing? They're telling people on certain pitches they're going to throw a ball or they're going to throw a slider rather than a fork ball or what do you call it? Split finger.
Yeah.
Uh, this is insane. The integrity of the game is completely destroyed, but we got all these doorknobs in politics who are going, oh, well, nobody's going to be hurt by this. It's only betting. I mean, it's destroying the infrastructure of sports.
It's terrible, Paul. Like, I don't bet on sports. I know people, whatever, right? But it will hurt the integrity of the game and undermine all of those things. And anyway, it's terrible. Like the
And you're looking right around the world. They're betting on, every sport is affected. Cricket, I'm reading about cricket where, they're throwing the ball just outside the wicket, whatever, doing certain things for propositional bets. And people are making 60, $70,000 on these. And the players themselves are getting kickbacks of 30, 40,000. They're getting $20 million a year
yeah,
and they're still stealing money on the side.
it's
And
it's
there's
terrible.
something
And
really wrong.
yeah, uh, it's it's gonna be. I don't know if there's going to be any kind of a reckoning about it. I mean, the toothpaste is out of the tube in some ways. There's
Ban
sports
it.
gambling
It's
ads.
insane. I mean, you got idiots like Wayne Gretzky and Peyton Manning promoting this. These people who have used their good names to promote this as if it's all just fun and there's no downside to it. I mean, Wayne Gretzky and his wife were caught up in a gambling scandal back in like 2006, and they
Oh,
still get a free pass. It just makes me sick thinking that this is going on, and these people have no scruples or morals, and they're just going along with it. And you've got people saying, but yeah, it's my right to bet. If I lose money, I lose money. That's not the point. It's the integrity of the game, it's the integrity of society itself.
yeah, sports has to stay like that. I mean, what are we gonna? I guess maybe we can just watch the Olympics, but I'm sure there'll be betting scandals there too. It used to be the case, Paul, like with Tiger Woods and such, that the brands would be worried about the athlete that, ruining their name. Now it's the other way around. Like these gambling companies and ads, they're bringing down, yeah, no, you start hearing people talk about Gretzky or Peyton Manning or others like that. Well, that that's fair game, I think, to affect their reputation negatively if they're associated with this, making money on it.
And a lot of online a lot of online betting companies are run by, I'm going to tell you this right now, criminals,
Oh yeah, no doubt. And they always make money.
organized crime,
Yeah,
Hell's Angels. These are the people running it. And we have no wherewithal here because we live, I've been sort of caught up in this the last couple of days studying utilitarianism. Utilitarianism,
sure.
the whole philosophy, Jeremy Bentham philosophy that's behind the line in the U.S. Constitution, the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
And we have this whole notion that people should be free to pursue happiness and not have any pain, any conflict, whatever. Well, look what our world has become. All kinds of people who are all about pursuing their own personal happiness, and things are going to hell in a handcart. It's like because they don't want to deal with it.
Well, Las Vegas has always made money, and the sports gambling companies, they advertise on all the big shows and the big games, so they're making money too. And that means the people who gambling are losing. It's as simple as that. So it's not working well.
As my mother used to say, I go to her. She was a secret gambling addict.
Yeah.
and I'd go up to visit her, and in her bedroom, on the mirror in her dressing room, she'd have all her winning chits from going to the casino in Niagara Falls. And I'd say to her, I'd be really impressed if you had all the losses on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Let's
she goes, "Oh, you take the fun out of everything, you know?"
yeah. Hey, play a game of cards for $1. That's fun. That's fun enough. So, all right, Paul, we've got some major stories this week passing through. Um, Want to get into, well, I wanted to talk a little bit about Chris d'Entremont first, maybe before we get into some of the other police and law stories. Chris d'Entremont, MP from I guess Southwest Nova Scotia, Yarmouth area, conservative, the only conservative elected in Nova Scotia, has now crossed the floor over to the Liberals this week. Made a big splash when that happened. Makes the budget more likely to pass. Now the governing Liberals only need 2 votes instead of 3, so that's all right. But the real story to me is the viciousness with which the Conservative Party has gone after Chris d'Entremont. Have you followed that at all?
Oh, I've been following it, yeah.
Yeah. So here's a little feather in the cap. So on Wednesday, I messaged the biggest news maker in the country in the morning to send him a little note to say, "Hey, man, you still have some friends, and I hope you're doing okay." And he wrote me right back. So anyway, I think he's doing all right. But don't first of all, don't blame Chris for doing this at all. I think the voters in his area were, uh, they like him, but I don't think they like the leader too much, and he won a narrow victory after always winning big victories down that way. So that's I guess the first part. I don't know. What did you read into it?
Well, in politics, it's not really, I mean, philosophically, it's not a good thing to be switching parties after the election and crossing the floor. It does happen. It seemed to be opportunistic, but I think I agree with you. I mean, you look at the leader, Pierre Polyev. I don't trust this guy to house sit my cats. It's like I just don't trust him. And he just doesn't seem authentic to me. He doesn't seem like he's the best guy the Conservative Party can come up with they'd have a potentially winning hand across the country, I would think, if they had a strong leader. And they've got this doorknob running things who has no curb appeal whatsoever to anyone of any who's a thinking sentient being.
Yeah, especially in the East Coast here, he really, really didn't resonate at all. I mean, he'll probably win, he'll probably pass the leadership review, which is scheduled for January, although that's looking like a long way away now in some ways. But what struck me, yeah, the party really went after him, and some Nova Scotia conservatives really, really went after him in a very personal way, I thought. And it seemed to me that the reason for that was to discourage anybody else from going, switching sides. If you're an MP in any, in Ontario or out west or anywhere, and you're thinking of switching sides, well, look what they did to Chris d'Entremont. They went after him. It was personal. Um, and I think that was the goal there.
Well, that's the Canadian way, like when we've talked about this before. That when we did big stories during the Nova Scotia massacres and brought out the 911 tapes, etc. They went after us. They brought in the Ontario Provincial Police to go after us, not to charge us, not to do anything, but to send a message to anyone else who tries to do it.
Yeah.
That's the way it works. Like people are
Yeah.
saying, "Aren't you afraid?" No, no, this is just a message to the next guy down the road, and that's what they're doing to D'Entremont. That's the Canadian way of doing things.
But the real message they're sending is to the voters, which is everything that if you thought we were a bunch of vicious, going after people, calling people names, kind of a party, well, we'll just reinforce that by our behavior when this occurs. So I don't think they're helping themselves in their reaction as much as they think they might be. Um,
Nope.
all right. So uh, the other thing,
Poppies.
Oh yeah,
Poppies.
okay. So people will see if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're not, if you're listening in, I'm wearing a poppy. Guess what? I wore a poppy to court this week. Every day I went to court. But if I was in Kentville, that might have been an issue. Apparently this week we had a big poppy controversy in Nova Scotia. Did you? What did you think of that?
Well, it wasn't the only place. I mean, there in Saskatchewan, a similar thing happened as well. But the one in Nova Scotia was uncovered by, independently of what happened in Saskatchewan, was uncovered by Andrew Douglas at Frank Magazine and wrote a piece about it the other day about lawyers being banned from two courtrooms in Kentville because the judges say you can't wear any kind of adornment that would be deemed political. I don't know how a poppy is political.
Yeah,
And he wrote it, and I talked to Andrew about this yesterday, and he said within a few minutes of it going up on Frank's online website, uh, Premier Tim Houston was on his hind legs shouting about this outrage, um, and it took off as a national story,
yeah.
except in the CBC, which refuses to do anything relating to Frank Magazine or follow up on it or give it any credence.
Well, because
And
they'd have to, wouldn't they? They'd have to give him credit if they followed up on the story. They would have to say first reported by.
well, CTV and others did. National Post did and credited Frank Magazine. Um, but the CBC is just, I as much as I think it's an important institution, I think its methods of reporting and its standards of reporting are so woeful and biased that there needs an accounting. It's a difficult thing. Like when Polyev gets up and say we've got to ban the CBC. I think that's a bit extreme, but improvements need to be made. It's got to be more neutral than it is now, and more honest about the stories it does. I don't see it being honest.
How, yeah, like how is it not a story? A thing, the courts apparently banned something that is a major symbol of, this time of year. The premier comes out very strongly on the topic. If that's not the lead story in a, CBC Nova Scotia website, what is? Like that doesn't, come. That was very peculiar. But it was there. Okay, so here's the other thing. So the judiciary, the judges themselves they can't go out and say, well, here's what I really said and meant. The judiciary tried to sort of twist it a little bit, all right? Because what the premier said was that there was an order. There was an order. Well, what the judge, it wasn't a court order on a piece of paper saying anything. It was the judge telling the sheriffs or the court workers, you need to get permission or ask permission. So it wasn't technically an order, and that's what the judiciary comes back with. Andrew Preeper, their spokesman, saying, "Well, it wasn't a court order. It was just, they have to do this." Well, that's the same thing. If the judge says something in a courtroom or a court building, and that's an order, you don't, it's not usually an option. That was weird. Now wearing them on the robes, maybe I don't think too many people necessarily do that, but lots of people were wearing them in court where I was the last week, and nobody th thought anything of it.
Yeah, I'm not a big, I don't really wear poppies. I don't wear any of those things. I remember back, just as an aside, I remember back at the Globe and Mail back in, when International Women's Day was first created and people would wear yellow ribbons to show their support. And I always found the guys who wore the yellow ribbons were the biggest misogynists and leches in the place. It was their way of getting lucky. I mean, oh, look at I support you. I'd
Yeah.
rather just deal with my deeds and treat people fairly. And I wasn't going to wear a yellow ribbon to say that, hey, hey, miss, like me because I got a yellow ribbon. I just don't like it.
There's there's a 100% agree with that. There's a term for that now. I think it's performative male, where you're, pretending to be, this great feminist aligned kind of a guy, but of course you're not. I always like the Kramer approach. if you're making me wear the ribbon, that's why I don't want to wear the ribbon.
Yeah.
But
I was ahead of my
all,
time. I could see it back then. I said,
yeah,
all these scoundrels are wearing the yellow ribbon. And I'm going, you
yeah.
know,
Uh, Although I will say, I did think about this at I was walking around IKEA today, thinking about what to talk about on the show, and one of the things I noticed is there weren't a lot of people wearing poppies there. I'd say I'd put it at about 10%, maybe at the most. About the
and
yeah, so maybe that's
and
where we
while
are.
we're in Nova Scotia, the other big story going on, another story broken by Andrew Douglas in Frank magazine again, ignored by everyone else and not giving him credit, was Mike Smith from Trailer Park Boys, Bubbles, being charged with sexual assault from a couple of years ago. Um,
Yeah, he's going into court tomorrow for his first appearance. Mike Smith, formerly a musician before he was an actor on the show. Big hit show, of course, and now the three guys, the three main actors, own the rights to it. They have a season that's been filmed that has not been released yet. I think that is all in jeopardy at this time because of Mike Smith, who has not always had the greatest reputation in that regard, from what I understand.
well, look at it now. He's charged, he's going to court, he's living the Trailer Park Boys life for real.
Well, well, maybe he'll get, yeah, he'll get to experience some of it. He'll get some material for it if they ever let him back on TV again. Yeah, that's we'll have to follow that. I'm gonna see tomorrow who's. I'll be curious to see who's representing him. I think they're doing pretty well off the residuals from that show. Uh,
One other point on the
yeah,
CBC, just, we should go into it more someday, but, in England, you see what's going on at the BBC, where two top executives
yes,
had to leave the BBC, resign over editing of Trump's comments regarding January 6th, making it look like he said something he didn't say.
yeah. Now that's
And
yeah,
the same thing I find with the CBC, that we need, that what's going on at the BBC, the same sort of politics is involved. Like I go after right wing, left wing, I don't care. I consider myself a middle guy. And I see the CBC has gone way over the line, like the BBC, twisting and manipulating stories and coverage to suit a political agenda, much like Fox News does on the other side. And I complain about that as well.
well, but I thought, Paul, for years and years, and it was funny, that BBC was above that, would be way above that, right? And in fact, this weekend we're at the hotel. It's the only place you get cable anymore, right? Everybody just has their streaming services and flips around, but in cable, you're just flipping through the channels. And at one point, we get to the BBC World News, right? And I was explaining to my son, hey, listen, if you want to know what's going on in the world and a trustworthy source, you watch the BBC World News and you'll get it. And well, I guess not. I guess not anymore. So that's
No.
anyway, that's a disappointing thing, and that it just feeds right into the the MAGA kind of don't trust the media, the right wing don't trust the media kind of narrative, and I think places like the BBC have to be extra careful.
And that's what I said. Looking at this, our experiences with the CBC over the last 5 years, we're clearly blackballed by the CBC, even though we do legitimate journalism. And others are like us, are treated the same way.
Yeah.
It's a real problem in Canada because we don't have that many outlets anymore. And the one that should be there doing important, impartial work is not doing it because it clearly has an internal political agenda. And it's very disheartening.
It is. It's well, the guy resigned, so hopefully that's a step in the right direction, and he did it very publicly to make a point of it. So, maybe that'll lead to some changes over there. I think we need the same on this side of the ocean.
And last thing before we go to Chad, or to Kurt, I mean,
Yeah.
um, the ostriches.
Oh yeah. The poor ostriches. Ostriches, ostrichi. Which way does that go? Ostriches, yeah. It's a lot of
So after this
ostriches.
long, long battle, 300 ostriches are executed in a pen by a marksman. I don't know how much of a marksman you'd have to be. I mean, their heads are small, but 300 killed because bird flu, and The owners wanted to keep them alive in a big movement right across, probably worldwide to save the ostriches, and eventually they were destroyed. What's your thoughts on that?
I think people probably presume that ostriches are endangered, and maybe they are. I don't really know, but there was quite a few to be gone all at once. I'd have thought it was really weird to have 300 ostriches in one place in British Columbia. So I had a little bit of suspicion about the owners just for that reason. Um, but I don't know. There must be somewhere. I don't know. I didn't feel like they exhausted all of their potential avenues to try to save them. That
Well,
seems like a
I've
shame to
read
kill
about it,
anything.
and I'm getting bombarded by people saying this is an outrage and overreach by the government, and invasion of defying the property rights and animal cruelty, and of course, the whole underlying thing is vaccines.
Yeah.
The anti-vaxxers are really big on this, and the animal rights people. And this couple seemed to be a bit notorious in their town, not well liked. Lots of complaints. 69 of the birds had died from avian flu. And then you have the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. argument that they should be saved because these survived, so they must have better genetics. But the problem is, the scientific problem is you don't know where the virus is. And if it leaks over to man and other animals, it could be, a terrible tragedy, terrible calamity. Um, I still have to side on the side of science on it.
Yeah.
And I went and got my vaccines too. So, I guess I'm biased because I believe in science.
Yeah, well, me too. I mean, the owners had their chance. They had the publicity. They would have had all kinds of support around the world, and everybody kind of thinking about it and thinking about different ways to save them, and nobody came up with a good one. And so that tells me it wasn't there. So,
Yep.
so
Well, let's get it. Let's get Curt.
all
He's
right,
he's
let's see Curt tonight now.
finally Curt Allen.
Well,
Hi, Curt. You're looking good. How
hey,
are you?
I have to tell you, I've been so impressed listening to you guys talking about the World Series and stuff.
That's our main
Well,
calling, Kurt. We're really just baseball analysts here doing a law show.
well, I have to tell you, it was a good series, I thought, and I should tell you that I grew up, if I ever did grow up, as a Brooklyn Dodger fan, and so I my heart was kind of torn between who to root for, although I live in Toronto. But I think Toronto had an amazing season, and it was great.
You didn't do what the what are the Kings our King's son did and wear a Dodgers hat though in to a game, I
No,
suppose.
no, no, no. And every time I get a Blue Jays hat, my grandson wants it, so I don't have it for very long.
Yeah, well, that's good.
One of the best comments on it, Curt, was Phil Mushnick, who's an old school writer for the New York Post, which I often read for entertainment value. Um, and Phil wrote a column the other day saying the Blue Jays did everything they could to restore our faith in baseball. And he wondered essentially why couldn't the Blue Jays move to New York and be New York's team?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Don't really have an opinion on that, but I think they had an amazing season for a young team. Obviously, it was a good learning experience too. I hear they've made an offer on the young fellow that is could leave this year,
Oh,
and I think
Bichette,
they need
yeah.
and he's an important part of the team. So let's hope they sign him. And I just think there were so many young players that played so well. Whether it's Lucas or Barger or whoever. I mean, everybody stepped up and did the job, right?
Well, the funny thing is, you think the Blue Jays are young, but their average age is actually pretty high.
Well,
Yeah,
that's because of Max Scherzer probably.
Well, their average age, I think they're like one of the second or third oldest team in the playoffs.
they could be, but 42 doesn't help
Yeah.
keep. down, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what about the 22-year-old pitcher? I mean, wasn't he
Yep. No.
eh?
No, it was great. That playoff experience will be huge going into the years to come.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
So
I'm
the
happy
reason
to.
we called on you, Curt, is the last couple of weeks, there's sort of uh, a vein of great stories uh, in Canada that's not being explored anywhere. We've had in recent weeks Tom Juby, Janet Merlo, Paul McNamara, Kurt Petrovich, Paul Derry, Edgar MacLeod. They all brought something to the table in various stories. And we're wondering how you saw some of those stories, being a former deputy commissioner in the RCMP and having the contacts you have in policing and security across the country. You're a big shot when it comes to policing in Canada. And what did you think of some of these things? And what stands out in your mind?
Well, I have to tell you that listening to them was very difficult, and none more difficult than Janet Merlo. That was heartbreaking. It was absolutely heartbreaking. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that one even dreads to hear from some other country, in a country that may be far, far away. And you know, and for her to come on and to tell that story, I thought took a lot of courage. Both Suzanne and I have talked with her, since a little bit, and I'm happy now to know her. I didn't know her when I was in the RCMP, but I do now. And the pain and suffering that all of these women went through, and in the numbers that there were, I just think is awful. And then when you consider the fact that there really wasn't any accountability that anyone seems to be aware of, that it doesn't seem that anyone was held accountable for their actions. And I just find that's intolerable. This is Canada we're talking about. And we're talking about a police service that at one time might have thought it was a premier police service. Those years obviously are far in the rearview mirror, in my view. But it was that for me, of all of the 4 or 5 presentations that you've had recently, that was heartbreaking, literally heartbreaking.
Kurt, when you're thinking of that from a leadership perspective, when you hear about those issues and you're thinking, well, if you're in the upper echelons, and is that among the concerns must be ongoing recruitment, because stories like that get out, and a young woman that's thinking of joining the RCMP hears that, and that's really going to be discouraging, isn't it?
It should be no surprise to anyone that the organization is having difficulty to recruit, and particularly women, but it's having difficulty recruiting anyone. And that, when I think I've said here before that when my daughter is my oldest child, and I dissuaded her in the early years, and she was thinking about the RCMP. She's a scientist today and doing very well. She probably would have been thinking about a lab job or something like that. But at that time, it wasn't these kind of issues that was on my mind. It was more the lifestyle of relocating from province to province, and with, and trying to make that work as a family, which has played havoc, I think, on the organization. But there's no excuse for any of this that we're talking about. I'll tell you a story. Before I left the RCMP in my later years, very late years, I heard of a harassment situation involving a young woman on a detachment that was under my command. The way I dealt with it probably today wasn't the right way, because what I didn't contact the commanding officer. I arrived unexpectedly at the detachment. What I had said, and I had made it public, if you have an issue and you're not getting satisfaction, here's my phone number. And I got calls, and I got a call in this particular case about a harassment situation. I went to the detachment. I interviewed the individual, and then I went to the commanding officer. Now, obviously, all of the commanding officers learned of how I did that a short time later. and probably didn't view it in the manner that I would have liked them to. But that's exactly what happened. And my doing it in that way for me was sending a message that these are serious issues, and they are serious issues. It has always been a male-driven organization, and we all know that until 1974. The force did not do enough work to prepare the organization for women. And that might sound simple, but it wasn't. I mean, if you stop and think around the 1,000 or 1,100 detachments around the country that have been operated by men, 100% men, and all of a sudden there are women showing up on these detachments, and they have to ride along with other people during the night. I mean, that there were challenges with all of that. There were challenges in families. And not only that, it led over time to like who do members marry when, like in my time, I lived in 5 provinces, relocated frequently. How do you make a family work that way? And that led to members marrying members, which at one time that seemed maybe like an idea. But then when you come back to this kind of behavior, like it still bothers me what Janet was talking about. The mere thought that you're driving by a police service and you come to realize within that service, these kind of criminal acts are taking place by people who wear a badge. For me, in this country, is just horrifying.
Well, one of the things, Curt, that struck me after we talked to Janet Merlo and I had a chat with you, you said, I can't believe there are that many.
Yeah.
Right across the country. You were shocked by the numbers.
Well, I was shocked. Number one, I was shocked about the whole situation, any part of it. Number two, I was shocked about the total number of women who presented themselves in the class action. And I was really shocked, horrified, when she was talking about the number of rapes or events classified as rapes or could be classified as rapes, which I think is, if I remember, was 132 or something about that number, right? And like I said, when you stop and think about that, like if I was reading a news article and it was about Scotland Yard or the FBI and I was reading that kind of a story, you know what I'd be thinking about. But this is here. This is in Canada. And we've had commissioner after commissioner and senior management after senior management that has not done anything to make it right. There has been no accountability, is what we're being told. And everybody, whether it's a commissioner or any senior person in the organization, has a superior. There are ministers. There's a prime minister. It's just totally intolerable any of that happen. It's just horrifying to even think about or talk about.
Kurt, it strikes me that you going directly to the complainant in that case and kind of jumping over their commanding officers and going a little outside of the structure might have been a good thing, just to reinforce to the existing commanders, you're not getting this.
Well, that was my style, sadly, maybe, but that's what it was. I mean, I wanted to pass a message that this wasn't tolerated and I was going to deal with it. And when I gave people my phone number, I meant, if you have an issue, call me.
One of the things you earlier said, you referred to the RCMP still has difficulty recruiting members and is having, as many police forces are right now. But the politicians don't seem to notice this. They're throwing money at the force, $100 million here, $20 million there. Moncton recently said, "Oh well, we're putting in another couple of $1 million to hire 5 more, or 10 more, or 15 more." This is going on across the country, but they don't seem to be able to face the reality that there's no people there. They say we're going to hire 1,000 new federal officers. From where? Where are they going to train them? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I don't think, number one, I mean, I've been monitoring all of that very closely. The budget cut of $97 million is significant at this time with crime the way it is. However, having said that, it's a drop in the bucket on a $6 billion budget. I was at a meeting here this week where we were talking about the reductions that we think are going to happen to the public service under the current government, and trying to compare them back to John Chrétien Program Review 1 and Program Review 2, which you may recall. And I don't think what's going to happen now is anywhere near that significant, because I can remember the RCMP dropped 2,300 positions under program review. But to come to your point, Paul, if you can't hire now, I don't think it matters how many more people want. It's not going to make it any easier to hire. And I live in Halton, and Halton is not having a problem hiring. There are candidates, but they have implemented programs that have facilitated that, like cadet programs, auxiliary programs, programs that bring young people into the organization long before they may be an officer, but that familiarizes themselves with the organization. And, you know, Halton has a reputation. For me, the reputation of the RCMP is dreadful, to tell you the truth. Just that issue alone. Like, who with a daughter would want that daughter to join the RCMP in that circumstance?
Yeah,
And had there been follow-up, had there been accountability, okay, so something happened. I mean, these dreadful acts happened. And there was, you know, class action. There are other class actions that are working their way through the courts if they make it through. And some of them are not pretty either. But it just strikes me as being so terrible. And, you know, so there are court decisions, and Janet says that the RCMP hasn't lived up to some of the conditions that were in the decisions. And they're kind of being dissuaded about going back and pursuing that. Well, my message would be go. You know, but like I say, the commissioner has a superior. Like, it doesn't look like anybody took that decision serious enough to follow up, and I find that terrible. I don't have the words to express that.
We're not hearing much on the political side, Curt, about any of these issues, but the point you make about Halton and their recruiting, I mean, people are going to want to be police officers. There's always going to be a portion of the population that would love to be a police officer, and you know, the honor that can go with that. But they'll find somewhere else. Like, it just they won't go to the RCMP at this point.
No, but it's not only that. I mean, that's a big part of it for sure. But when you look at the organization's reluctance to move forward and modernize, and I want to come to what Edgar was talking about a little bit, if we have time. Yeah. It hasn't modernized. You know, you and I have talked about the structure in Nova Scotia, and that structure is across the country, except for Ontario and Quebec, where they're not there under contract. You can't operate effectively today with that structure. And he said the same thing, but they won't change. And you know, there are so many things that are going against the organization today. There's lots of them, far too many of them, actually.
Well, Edgar MacLeod said last week that you don't need more money to throw more money at it. Politicians are throwing money at it. You need to rethink it. You have enough resources. You agree with that?
I've done a bit of research, looked at the policing per population across the country. Nova Scotia is exactly the same as Ontario, 171 per 100,000, 171 officers per 100,000. There are some that are a little higher than that, some that are a little lower than that. Today, I was taking a look at the per capita debt across the country by province. Nova Scotia is far from the highest. I've heard people say, well, Nova Scotia has the highest debt. It does not according to what I'm reading. Quebec does. And Ontario is higher than Nova Scotia. But to come back to your point, it's using advanced technology, and it's having a structure that allows you to have mass when you need it, and rethinking the whole thing. It's a mind change. The mind is I've said for many years, I think the mind of the organization is frozen and has been for far too long. It's not embracing modernization as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, so more money and whatever hundreds of millions to fix. I mean, that's not the answer, I guess. And you've been involved, Kurt, with police organizations that have tried to reform, and you've seen them through it. It must be a difficult process.
Well, it takes leadership. There's one word, leadership. And it takes an association that's willing to work for the right things. And I think I'm pleased with policing in Ontario. I think we have, by and large, very good leadership. Although I would have said here 5 or 6 years ago there was probably a leadership crisis. Not enough people coming along that wanted to modernize the way we operate, the way police operates, and the way police needs to operate and relate to the public. Trust is something you have to earn. It doesn't come with a uniform. And I think the RCMP has lost sight of that. But here in Ontario, we've had good leadership. We invest in education for our senior executive, I think far more than probably the federal government does. Rotman, for example, programs and things like that. We make sure that that happens. We take care of our senior leadership, and that's what it takes. It takes leadership.
But isn't the issue still that the problem with the RCMP is that inside it's insular and they're protecting the buffalo, but the politicians won't go. No politician has criticized them for the Nova Scotia massacres. Five
Well,
years later, the politicians are stuck in this paradigm where the RCMP is seen to be an untouchable symbol of Canada. And I would argue the Toronto Blue Jays are more a symbol of Canada or the tragically hip, but not the
I
RCMP.
think I think you've touched something that's important, and there's a photograph that has been sent to me, if once, a dozen or more times. And whether or not it's an actual photograph or something that has been touched up with by AI or something, I don't know. But you may or may not have seen it. It's a picture of our Prime Minister Carney, the Commissioner of the RCMP, and the Commissioner has his arm around Carney's shoulders. That picture for me is the opposite of what one would expect. If you look at the police organization, you look at it as a symbol of independence, independent investigation, some distance from its masters. I served in the RCMP a long time, many years as a senior person. The political world is a community. There were always investigations involving the political world. At times, there were many, many of them. And I can tell you truthfully, I never saw one case where there was interference or a hint of interference. I don't think I could say that today, just from looking at what I see and what I hear. I don't think I could. And like we talk about prime ministers who are all a prey of ethics and that kind of thing. Well, most of these journeys that might occur, the RCMP are right along with it.
Yeah, that's a major problem, and we're seeing that down in the U.S. at a larger level too, where the political arm is directing the FBI and investigations, and obviously that doesn't go very well. There was a big case in the Supreme Court of the U.S. this week on the tariffs, right? And this will kind of show if there's really a separation down there between the political and the legal branch. Uh, I listened to some of the arguments that the Trump lawyers were making and the other side about whether the tariffs were legitimately put in place by the Trump administration. And the Supreme Court justices just tore them apart, right? So now the question is, well, are they actually going to say that in a decision and say, no, these are illegal and it can't be done? I mean, it's tariffs and not criminal investigations, but it's the same principle at stake.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I worry about our country. I think politics is playing a very large role in many, many things that it didn't in the past. One can look at the protests that are taking place across the country, the way police are treating that across the country, and I don't think that, I don't think that a group of seniors could go out and block the gardener and not be removed. Um, but that's not the way life is in this country. The last couple of years, at least. And
Um,
And I
Go ahead.
think the RCMP is far too close to government. You know, there has been discussion in the past about, the commissioners of the RCMP have been appointed by the Prime Minister. Is that the best policy going forward? Should it not be an all-party committee of some kind or something? I think we need something that takes away any fog or risk that the organization isn't independent of government and is unable to master its investigations in an independent manner.
Um, Before I get into what I was going to say, you brought up the Prime Minister and the Commissioner of the RCMP being arm in arm. Same thing in Nova Scotia. Premier Tim Houston and the local Assistant Commissioner Dennis Daly are often seen arm in arm or side by side, buddy buddy. I think it's wrong. You obviously think it's wrong. But my question relates to Edgar MacLeod last week, talking about federal policing and the lack of federal policing being a cause, one of the causes for crime at the local level in rural areas and whatever. And the RCMP hasn't done very much to rectify this. The federal government hasn't done much to rectify it. And segueing a bit, in the last couple of days, there was a money laundering conference in Canada about, you know, Canada is the back office for organized crime. That money has been coming into this country, and the RCMP is not there to stop it. The final point being that one of the people who attended that was Rita Troika, who published a piece in the Globe and Mail the other day. Lawyers are the black hole of money laundering. And why is Canada turning a blind eye to that? So there's a lot there for you to digest, but I'm sure you got something to say.
Well, I think, I remember, I think I might have mentioned here before, I was in the force and on the periphery of FINTRAC when it was created, the Canadian money laundering regime or anti-money laundering regime. And I recall very vividly that word had it that Canada almost had to be embarrassed by the rest of the Western world to even have a regime. And so it wasn't taken very seriously. And I think up until the time that I left the bank, at least in my banking experience, I believed at that time that we still had one of the weakest regimes of any Western country. And I believe that probably still exists today. And I don't think anyone has to look any further than our real estate market, our house prices, to realize, and if you think about the problems that were very public in British Columbia, the Vancouver area, many, many years ago, I think we have serious money laundering issues. And I don't think that we're getting anywhere close to it. And I don't blame all of that on the police. I think the regime itself is weak. The reporting, the amount of information that I remember going to FINTRAC was enormous. And their analysis of it was probably okay. But we just don't have the resources to send 1,000 cases to every day.
It's a tough one, in the country. You wonder sometimes, Kurt, if there's people in the country that benefit from it being a weak jurisdiction in terms of money laundering oversight and such. The news this week that Facebook, I think 10% of their ad revenue comes from, illegitimate sources, scam sources. And so, well, why would they be motivated to get rid of it? It's a big source of revenue. Uh, this would be a big source of revenue for some people in some positions within Canada, and maybe that's why there's less of an effort to police it. Well,
I think many, many years ago, there was a feeling that the more money there was in the marketplace, the stronger the economy would be. However, I think we've learned over time that that can inflate markets like real estate, for example. We have one of the largest land masses in the world, and yet we have among the highest real estate prices. One has to really wonder about that. Something's not right.
I remember back at the Globe when I was at the Globe and Mail in the 80s, one of my focuses was, I've talked about this before, looking at the expansive development around Toronto in York Region and Peel Region and wondering where is all this money coming from? And we had an actuary come in at one point and targeting one of the people who was, sort of the making, would become a billionaire doing this work. And the actuary looked at their business and estimated that for them to get as wealthy as they did in the previous 20 years, using every break in the book, it should have taken 110 years for them to get that wealthy. And they did it in 20. And they said that says there's more money there than we know, that there was more seed money that we don't know about. And
Well,
but the government didn't want to do anything about it. I mean, basically we became the bad guys for just reporting it.
well, when I was working at the bank, I mean, there at that time, and it may have changed now, but there was no requirement for the bank to release a customer where there was suspicion of money laundering. The whole idea was to report suspicious transactions. But at the same time, you didn't excuse the customer or
Yeah.
tell the customer to stop banking, right? Uh, and so I think that's part of the problem from the outset. The only thing that our regime did was try to identify suspicious transactions and report them. And when you're working in a bank branch and somebody buys a house in the community, and you're supposed to identify and satisfy yourself of the source of funds that are being used as a down payment or whatever, that's not an easy job with the information you have, particularly if the person buying the house is coming in from a foreign country. But I see house after house around here that is sitting for months, nobody in it, being renovated. Once a house is purchased, renovation is done or whatever, that money's pretty clean in the minds of a lot of people.
Yeah, and lawyers are supposed to ask too about what's the source of funds, but it's not a
No,
rigorous examination by any means.
Well, what do you think, Adam? Like the Globe and Mail article from 2 days ago, lawyers are the black hole of money laundering. I mean, you're a lawyer.
It can be a weak point, right? Because there's so much secrecy involved, and for anybody to go in and look at a lawyer's file, that's not an easy thing to do. So yeah, it could certainly be through, you know, either through a lawyer not understanding what is in front of them and who the client might be, and not asking the questions, being naive about it, or actively using their trust account as a means of advancing fraudulent transactions. I mean, it can be done, and it's very difficult for outside authorities to inspect a legal a lawyer's file, a law office, or any of those things. They need a pretty serious court order before they would get in there. So it's definitely a vulnerability.
I wanted to mention, one of the things that Edgar talked about, guys, was downloading. And you alluded to that, Paul, I think, in a way, in what you said. That's hard to understand. It's hard to conceive that concept of downloading expense. The RCMP will take on a responsibility, but you have to pay for it. I don't think there's anything that kills the spirit of cooperation and working together probably any quicker than that kind of an approach. I just because it's counterproductive, totally counterproductive.
Okay, just to elaborate there, so the audience who may not have been following this, Edgar MacLeod said that the recent, as I understand it, I think you're referring to this, that he said in recent years, the RCMP is now charging other police forces for services and charging communities for services that used to be rendered free as in the spirit of cooperation. And they've turned it into a business-like sort of venture. And that's what you're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about. And for the small amount, like again, you have a $6 billion budget for the small amount of money that you're going to recover for what it is that you're doing. I just think it just kills the concept of we're here to help and we're all going to work together. We live in the
But
same.
politicians go along with it. Politicians think they're running a business too. And they
Well,
think this is
and
a
I
bright
don't.
idea. When the RCMP talks to them like they're businessmen, they're going, yeah, that's what we want to hear. They're making the business case. Listen to the latest budget and latest things from, Ottawa and Nova Scotia, for example. They sound like corporations, not like governments.
I think what that points out to me, though, is that our chiefs of police as an organization, Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, and I've had discussion with one chief in particular, the model of making them getting together once a year, twice a year, and creating these resolutions, and and having the Solicitor General, the Public Safety Minister, whoever it is, come out and listen to these resolutions has failed miserably. They need a much stronger voice as a collectivity, I think, in terms of having success and helping policing move forward, and particularly maybe on what we've been talking about with money laundering, issues of that nature. I think we're very weak as a group in terms of the effectiveness we have making headway with politicians, because as you have just said, the politicians aren't listening, or they don't seem to be doing anything about it.
Well, they should understand there's only one taxpayer, right? That's whether it's a federal issue, the feds trying to get money from the provinces and vice versa, undermining these, the historical cooperation between forces. They're not saving any money. It's just going
It
to
comes
tax
all
one or the
out
other.
of one pocket. There's only one pocket to pay taxes, right?
Yeah.
One check. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
No, that's great, Kurt. I'm glad you've been watching the show. You've been catching up on all the different guests and such. We only have a few minutes here, I think, Paul, but I wanted to see, Kurt, if there was anyone else. I mean, we covered a few of the recent guests. Um, Probably tough to get into the Jacansky questions or any of the other things that we
I
heard
know
about. But was anything
there are
stand out, Kurt?
there are some of them that are touchy. I mean, the ones that dealt with discipline and that kind of thing. You're hearing one side of a story, and I'm not doubting what the members said. The Juby issue and Swiss Air, I thought was a stunner, to tell
Hmm.
you the truth. I really did. I had left the RCMP by the time that investigation was moving forward. And but I did recognize that there were a lot of people involved in it. You have a lot of ministries involved in it. There's more than public safety or Solicitor General back in the day, because you had transportation. It's an airplane crash. It's an international, so you have other countries involved. But I wasn't aware of the extensive involvement of U.S. authorities and their influence, and I certainly wasn't aware of Juby's, and I don't question it, take on the actual cause. But where my thoughts go on some of this stuff is it sometimes is easy to point a finger at an organization, whether it's the RCMP or Halifax Regional Police or whoever it is. But behind that, there's a minister of justice. And, in the federal government, that one Ministry of Justice has an office in every organization. And, there's a lot of, it becomes very complicated when the Crown, in the name of all of these organizations, is involved in something. And a lot of the decisions are, quite frankly, taken out of the hand of the institutions that should be dealing with some of these issues. And Adam, I'm sure you understand that.
I see that. Yeah, you get in-house counsel, or anyway, sometimes the legal advice overwhelms whatever else the actual, substantive organization may wish to do. My approach to it, Tom, I've represented some municipal governments, or sorry, Kurt, and I was thinking of Tom Juby, was always, well, what do you want to do? And I'll try to find a way that you can do that.
Right.
Rather than, okay, I'm seeing something that raises a cautionary thing in my mind, therefore don't do what you want to do. You should be trying to facilitate things within reason, of course.
Yeah, but when you get more than one ministry involved, it can get very complicated, big
Yeah.
time. I think about some of the larger snafus in the RCMP back in the time when I was there, a particular prime minister involved in an investigation, and a break and enter, and a successful break and enter into the prime minister's house. some of those issues, and the aftermath of that was not pretty, nor were the events themselves, but very complicated.
Well. Sounds like a story for the next show with next time we have
Yeah.
Curt on. That's great.
Always a pleasure, guys. Always a
Yeah.
Well,
pleasure.
we're going to continue, Curt. We have some guests lined up for the next couple of weeks who are going to go back into these themes, and I think you're going to find it very interesting.
Yeah, I hope somebody, I hope the province is, somebody at the province is listening. I find it, I'm very pleased, and I have had some communication with some other provinces over the years that are looking elsewhere for their policing solution. I'm very pleased to see that happen. I just think that it's best for Canada. I think the creation of Surrey, and I was looking at some stuff involving the Surrey Police Service today, and that's become very quiet, a very quiet story. And I don't know exactly how well it's functioning, but we're not hearing a lot that it's not. And I think I feel so strongly that that's the way for these large municipalities to go, as well as provinces. And part of the reason that I say that is Canada needs a first class federal police service. And I can't remember us ever having one. And that's done nothing but gone down, I think, over the last 20 years or so.
Well, that's quite a
On that point,
condemnation.
we'll have you back again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much, Curt, for taking your time today.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye
See
for
you
now.
later.
So, yeah, Paul, we need to get it back on. By the way, that kind of it might encourage people to go back to some of those other episodes too and watch them if they haven't already, just to hear some of the guests. Like Tom Juby was fascinating. Yeah, anyway, they all were. Edgar last week. So, what did you think?
It's yeah, it's great. It's good. It's good. He's a knowledgeable guy. He's been watching. He's absorbing it, and I'm glad he's coming on the show and letting people know that we're not just two people here saying this. There are credible people who are making the same argument or support our argument.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll be back next week, folks. No baseball anymore. There's not much to watch otherwise, but there'll be some interesting budget machinations in Ottawa. There'll be stories to follow and lots to talk about, I'm sure. Anything you're looking forward to this week, Paul?
Well, I'm looking at the OPP report on the complaint filed by Monty Robinson over the Duskansky affair at Vancouver Airport. Monty Robinson being who was convicted of perjury after the killing. We talked about this with Kurt Petrovich.
Yeah.
That report, after years, is going to be given to Monty Robinson on November 13th, I guess 4 days from now. And I hope to have a report on it next week. If not, maybe even Monty Robinson himself to talk about it.
Well, that would be nice to have him on, and we have some other guests coming along too in the next few weeks, so I think people will be excited about that, and
We have
so
some really good guests, really good stories.
yeah, so looking forward to all that and to discussing it with you, Paul, and with the audience. And we still we talked about this a few weeks ago, maybe of having an audience Q&A time. The Sean Astin Q&A told me that can work. I think we can control it and do a good job of it. So we'll see. We'll see if we can line that up technically
Look
and we'll
forward
find
to
a
it.
week. All right, all right. And so thanks everybody for watching tonight, and thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Have a good week.
Bye bye.